No Matty B today. The main point is we are trying to get the video up and running. So if you follow Southbound Sports on iTunes or any of the other podcast feeds, Stitcher, we're up on TuneIn, I believe. I'm going to have all of those up on the site. But if you follow us on there, we now have a video feed. So if you want to watch the live video, it's actually not going to be live. It's just going to be recorded. I've been posting the videos up on YouTube to this point. So now you have the option of watching a video feed of our podcast. I think this is going to end up expanding. What I like to do, it shouldn't be too many cuts, jump cuts. I like to run the show like a live radio show or like a live television show. We don't do a lot of cuts. There might be breaks just based on the limitation of the technology that we have. I think I can only have video in like 10, 15-minute segments. So each episode is going to be under that. I think we're going to focus and try to do extra shows that are only on YouTube, but you're still going to have the option of listening to our weekly breakdown in the world of sports, and that's going to be on your major podcast subscription services. So now, this week, it's our first video test. Probably not going to be as long as the other episodes, as we're just getting the technology sorted out. And like I said, there's not going to be any guests, so it's only going to be me, Richie Leahy. So thank you for checking it out. Please subscribe on whatever service you're on. Give us some feedback. Follow us on Twitter, Southbound Sports without the O in sports. You can search it and it should come up. And I think that's it for most of the major social or podcast related services. So go ahead, follow us, subscribe, leave a review. Today's show, it's going to be breaking down the championship games a little bit. Now what I want to do is I'm going to be doing some extra episodes, some extra shows to make up for this video test. So keep an eye out. You might get a little barrage of mini podcasts. I might put them all in one. It depends. Because what I want to do is take a look at the two Super Bowl teams. So just to recap, the NFC Championship game, the Falcons and the Packers. The Packers were not competitive at all throughout the game. I have the stats here, but even looking through the stats, I don't think the stats tell a whole lot about the game. Packers had two turnovers, but I think by the time it really mattered, it didn't. Like, he had an interception late, and I think there was a fumble. But the Falcons had such a commanding lead at halftime that the Packers were not really into the game. They didn't have a chance. They did come back. I think the closest they made it was maybe 3 scores, and by that I mean I think it was like 22 points. They might have made it 17 or so, but every time they scored, they just couldn't stop the Falcons. The Falcons were able to drive right down the field. Matt Ryan had a great game for the Falcons. He had 4 touchdown passes, 392 yards, and they just spread the ball out. He threw the ball to how many different receivers? 8 or 9 different receivers on the field. So he spread the ball around. Multiple receivers got touchdowns. Julio Jones, outstanding game, but I don't know if he was really the reason why the Falcons decimated the Packers like they did, because it comes down to a team effort. They were able to spread the ball around. They didn't have any issues, any trouble, anything like that moving the ball. The Packers just couldn't stop them. I know the Packers were injured a good bit, and we talked about that on the last podcast. But in the game, a lot of the key playmakers, they actually came back. Jordy Nelson was back in the game. I think Adams did play. Cook was there. So most of the key playmakers on offense were there, and they just couldn't move the ball. Most expected it to be a shootout, and that's because you have the Falcons' high-powered offense, and you had Aaron Rodgers, I mean, his stat line didn't end up too bad. He had 287 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he also had the interception. I might be confusing the timeline because he did have another pass that was almost intercepted, and it wasn't. They overturned it on a review call, but other than that, I think that was the fumble. Packers were driving to score, and the ball was just ripped from the running back down by the goal line. Falcons were able to recover, and then that led to them scoring, I think, right before the half and right after the half to really put the game out of reach. And turning now to the AFC side of things, it wasn't much different. The AFC had a similar game. The Patriots got out to a big lead. It wasn't as big as what the Falcons had, but they had a lead. Tom Brady was on point. He was able to drive right down the field, didn't have any issues. The Steelers, they had their own 2 turnovers, but again, I don't think it was really game-breaking. The score in that one ended up 36-17. There was an odd story that came out where the NFL is trying to push out that Antonio Brown was pouting after the game, and they're saying that the Steelers are complaining about it, but watching the game, I didn't see him really pouting. You know how normal players, if they're going to pout during the game, they're going to get into a scuffle. Something like that might happen. But I really didn't see that from Brown or any of the Steelers during the game. There was some disappointment for sure, and I don't really think that it was a time issue or really an injury issue for the Steelers. They came out, the Patriots just executed. The Patriots didn't even really go deep with the ball. They were just controlling the game clock. They went down. The time ended up being almost even. Patriots had the ball for 31 minutes. Steelers had it for 28. And other than that, they were just able to move the ball and control it. And it seemed like the Steelers, they just couldn't move the ball downfield either. But they just weren't as consistent as what the Patriots were able to do. So they could move the ball downfield little chunks at a time, but they couldn't make a deep throw. They weren't able to spread out the Patriots. And that's where the Steelers were very successful in years past. Whenever they made it to the Super Bowl, they had a receiver who was able to stretch the field. They had 2 or 3 receivers. Antonio Brown is great. Le'Veon Bell's great. But the way they work, Brown's he's a smaller receiver, more along the lines of a slot receiver. So if you really force them to go underneath, and they don't have anyone to stretch deep to give him room to work, as long as you wrap him up right after the catch, the Steelers aren't going to be able to do much, and that's what you saw happen. Now, the one negative that I did see that might come out of this game for the Steelers is Ben Roethlisberger. He's contemplating retirement, which would be a huge loss for the Steelers organization. And I love Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's a great quarterback. He's definitely underrated. He had some off-the-field issues when he first came into the league, and I think that might be why he's underrated. But other than that, he's been a spot-on quarterback. We have a ranking system up now. Well, we're getting it running, but what we're looking for are the greatest quarterback of all time, and I'm looking at the different stat lines to see which ones really matter. People throw up QBR and other flawed systems, but I'm looking at wins, Super Bowls, or championships, because I'm going to delve into the NFL, AFL pre-merger, pre-Super Bowl era to see if I can find any other quarterbacks and try to come up with a rating system. But just on pure stats, Ben Roethlisberger, he's in the top 10 in a couple categories all time. And he has 2 Super Bowl championships, which is what my cutoff was. If you have a Super Bowl champion, are you a multiple winner? And Ben Roethlisberger has won 2 times. So all around, he's a great quarterback, one of the greatest of all time. And if the NFL loses him, I don't know what happens with the brand. Maybe Matt Ryan can come up and be the next great quarterback. He has all the tools. He has some of the stats. But in playoffs, he's disappeared until this year. I know we had him in the championship game against the 49ers a few years back, and I wouldn't really blame that game on him. He did enough to have them win it. I think the 49ers with Jim Harbaugh just outcoached the Falcons that year. And you're going to see this year they're going to go up against Belichick, who is probably the greatest coach, probably of all time. I mean, yeah, he had Tom Brady, but you have a great situation where he has players that come in. Either one of them is going to be super great, Belichick or Brady. You can't say that neither of them are great or they're both mediocre and they make each other great. But looking at what they've done, if Tom Brady wins his 5th Super Bowl, he has to be marked down as the greatest quarterback of all time. He's already top 10, I think top 5 in most metrics. He has more championship wins than the other quarterbacks, even the ones he's compared to, Montana. He has more stats than him. His stats are higher. Yes, it was a different era, but overall, I'm going to try to get some type of rating system. So we do have a ranking system up on ranker.com. I encourage everyone to go out, vote for who you think is the greatest quarterback of all time. I'm going to be pushing it out the week before the Super Bowl, and feel free to vote. I might add other quarterbacks. It's going to be a living document, which means I'm going to keep updating it. Once the year's over, I'm going to double check my stats, but I do have stats up there initially, and we're going to be doing more polls and things like this in the future. So if all went smoothly, our first podcast with video should be live. Hopefully the video turned out. That will be on YouTube. So if you prefer watching videos of our interviews, we're going to be setting up some mini ones just to test out the technology. And I might do like little clippets, 5 to 10 minutes, I think is what the camera holds. So it depends on what the format's going to be. So we might have little videos go up, and then I might do a longer podcast version of like some of our highlight clips. I don't know. I haven't decided. But if you want to do just a podcast, we are going to have a weekly show, wrap up the greatest stories in sports for that week, whatever's happening, and maybe some stats and other things. So check it out. Please subscribe if you want. Subscribe to both. We'll probably be putting out other video content in the future. But that's it for this week. Keep an eye out for our Super Bowl preview stuff, and follow us on Twitter. Follow me. I'm Richie Leahy, your host. So thank you for watching this week, and we'll see you next week.